I think the stock market is pumping so much money into this economy. And to me, it's the only thing that explains it. Just like you'll see the economy floundering or whatever and look like you're going the wrong way. S&P jumps 15% and boom, everything's fine.
The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results. Any indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate and actual performance may differ. As always, please remember investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional.
And we're back with another edition of the Daily Dots. And I am joined, as always, by the brain trust himself, Mr. Chase Taylor. Bounce back day, fully expected it. Quite honestly, I was actually expecting a little bit more rip to the upside, especially on the broader markets.
Yeah, I mean,
we had a really nice day.
I think at one point during the day you had that, but it kind of faded.
So what did we see? Well, we'll give us a rundown on the markets. So many different things to talk about today.
Yeah.
It's a hard time knowing which direction.
So S&P closed up 0.37, Q's up 0.65. And one reason I will say it is a significant bounce back. At one point after hours, like overnight in futures, you were down like 1%.
Yeah.
So you kind of went from down 1% to up 1%, and then you closed kind of in between all that. Small caps had a nice bounce back, up 1.4, equal weight up 0.6. Mag 7 up 0.76, so Mag 7 barely beat. Equal weight for once. You had all world ex-US outperforming up 0.68. Dollar was essentially flat, which is a little notable because you had rates up a good bit. 10-year was up 8 basis points, and we'll talk about why. Coming up, you had gold up 0.8, silver up a little bit more than that, copper up less than 1%. And then as far as Mag 7 was concerned, basically it was like Google and Tesla, and the rest not super impressive. Vol down 4%. And what was the other thing? No, that's it.
Yeah. Trying to think about which direction we can go with this.
So to go back to the yields part, yields are up because we had the oral arguments in front of the Supreme Court on the IEEPA tariffs. I think if you're following along on that, it's pretty clear that the justices are pretty skeptical of it being something that's going to hold muster. So you went from so if you look at Cauchy, you were kind of like 40-ish% chance of them ruling in favor, and that dropped into the 20s throughout the day. So markets, air quotes, decided, like, watching that, like, well, okay, these have a less of a chance of holding up than they did before, which makes sense for why you would have yields popping up and stocks popping up at least on the day.
Yeah, no, it's I was telling you, it obviously it's over completely different things. But when you watch this tariff debate go down in the Supreme Court, it reminds me a lot of the Obamacare scenario, right? Because it comes down to, is it a tax or is it a tax? And that was the exact same way the Obamacare thing got dialed in. And before, now this one seems, actually, they seem oddly similar to me, meaning
there is some debate around the tax part.
Yeah, there's some debate around the tax part. The other part of it is going into the Obamacare decision, I felt highly confident that the Supreme Court would rule against it. And the reason why I thought they'd rule against it is because the way the legislation was written, it didn't allow you an opt-out.
Right.
Right. So you can't even really call it a tax because there's no way to get around it. Right. And so I actually thought that I still think that was a bad decision by the Supreme Court for that reason. Not because I'm going to sit there and try to make I'm not going to try to make an argument that socialized healthcare is against the Constitution, because it's not. If you voted it, I'm just saying the procedures that they went around, doing it. Yeah, it feels like
same
a similar
here. Tariffs aren't unconstitutional, but how you apply them can be.
Right. And one of the issues at the center of it, which is understandable, is that only Congress has the power of the purse. And so if you have tariffs that are indefinite, how is that different than passing a tax without congressional approval?
Right. It's in that same way. It's to go back to the revolution. It's taxation without representation, because your congressperson had no say in a tax. So it's like I hate to use this phrase in this way, but like it's kind of like having the king say like, well, the tax on this and this and this is this much, and you don't get a vote on it. You don't get to have your representative weigh in on it. Just sorry.
Yeah, I actually thought too, and I haven't delved into it. I just read some snippets. I actually thought the way that the administration's argument, at least from where I just thought I would have expected them to take a different tack that I thought would be a lot more effective in arguing the rule. Meaning,
to be fair, go ahead.
Well, just meaning if I was them and I was putting together a case to try to make, argue in front of the Supreme Court about why my tariff plan was legal and constitutional, I would gear it all toward the executive branch powers, and using tariffs to protect American workers, and I would try to tie it to international trade laws and say, look, I understand what you're saying on the taxation part of it is, but I can't get Congress to move, and I've got to use executive powers to use tariffs to protect the point or the aim of these different laws, right?
Yeah.
That's where I would have taken it. Now, I'm not a constitutional scholar, so I'm not saying they're stupid. I thought the approach was kind of odd because they're trying to argue it's not a tax, and that's a silly argument to me.
I think they are trying to make the arguments you're also trying to make. They're trying to make it sound really big and top down and stuff too. The problem they're running into, and to defend the lawyer here, like they just don't have a good case to make because
it's tax.
So well, not that at all. It's so many things that seem like that doesn't seem constitutional that have held muster over the last 200 years or whatever. It was usually because like it wasn't specific in the Constitution. So that's when people would use like the Commerce Clause or something like that to be like, oh, it fits in there, huh? And then people were like, well, I mean, I guess. In this case, it is explicitly enumerated power to Congress in the Constitution that tariffs that they're firmly in the legislative branch's purview and not at all in the executive branch's purview. So not just because it's a tax, but they went out of their way to be like, Congress controls this. And even if it was revenueless, like it made it clear, like regulating commerce, this is you, and tariffs, this is you. So it's,
yeah, no, and this is why I'd say I would attack it completely on the executive power side of it, because I think that's the only argument you have to make.
But what I'm saying is you can't use that because the executive power is outlined in the Constitution along with congressional power, and this is
agreed
expressly written in the Constitution.
Agreed, but there is significant precedent now I'm not saying I agree with all of it, but there is significant precedent on the executive power side of things, meaning the executive has been given substantial wiggle room in the enforcement of other existing legislation, which is the primary power of the executive branch, right?
Right.
And so that's what I was saying is, from a legal argument, I think that is a much better way to attack it. And like I said, they said things like that. Because of what you just cited from the Constitution, I've just long thought that the only way you're going to get this held up is if you go at it through that executive powers side of it. Because if you're not, I don't see another thing that is capable of overriding what you just cited.
But there shouldn't be, because the Constitution is clear on it. The only way to override it should be a constitutional amendment, because the Constitution is so clear.
I know, but that's one of the purposes of the executive powers, is for our country not to be stuck in neutral.
Sure, but what you're talking about is not that's extra constitutional stuff.
What I'm saying is that there is precedent for the executive branch getting, for instance, the suspension of habeas corpus went exactly against the wording of the Constitution as well.
For sure.
And that didn't get ruled against by the Supreme Court. Now, I'm not saying the composition of the Supreme Court is similar to the 1860s, but I am saying there is substantial precedent,
right,
in crises of granting the executive powers.
And in the law we're talking about, that is exactly what it handles. It's like, hey, in a major crisis, here are some limited powers to give to the president from Congress to deal with this stuff. Like, we don't have time to, maybe wait for this, but there's guardrails around it. Like, it can't be,
well, words like temporary.
Yeah. First of all, tariffs not one of the powers that was given to him, but like, if you need to like freeze some assets or freeze, like change a regulatory structure whenever it comes to like on the fly really quickly on an emergency basis over trade. Let's say like you start a war with somebody that you trade with. Like, well, maybe we should change the way we trade with them, really quickly on an emergency basis. Like, that was the idea of the original law and IEPA, which amended it actually to reduce presidential power there. But I would also say there's, I think there's an important argument behind all this of, if it's super expressly given to Congress, can they even offload that power onto the executive, right? Like, on some level, you have these three branches, they have certain significant powers. Are they allowed to hand them over to one of the other sides to be like, you do this, right? And I think that's an important question that may come up in the decision of this. Like, hey, like, you don't even get to delegate that because that one was given to you.
Well, the other part of it is I think it'd be hard pressed to make an argument that that's what Congress did. I mean, by default, that's kind of what's happened.
Right. I think they're arguing
that they didn't grant those.
Right. Yeah. So I think the White House would like you to think like, hey, like, they gave us the power to do this. And I think the reality is, if you go back and read the law, the prior law, the debate around the law, they weren't trying to do that. They were trying to give you, the president some power, like if things got crazy, to do some stuff,
Yeah.
But does that mean, to put on 50% tariffs on India for as long as you decide it's a good idea? Like, no, like that clearly doesn't hold muster there.
Yeah.
But with that said, this is one of multiple authorities they're using on tariffs. It's the best and easiest one for them to use. Because the other ones are very explicit, like, here's how long you have until you have to take the tariff off, and here's the limit on how high it could be. So that's why they chose this way of doing it. So if it does get struck down, it's not like all tariffs go to zero and like it's all over. It just means these tariffs get pulled off, and they have to use the other more difficult, more constrained ways of doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting setup. Based on my reading of it right now, I think I would go along with the Kalshi prediction. It feels like you're looking at about a 20-30% chance that the administration gets a win here. And it was always going to be a tough hill to climb. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. just because, like you said, I mean, there are examples and there is precedent, but when you get into the powers of the purse and the powers of taxation, those have been probably some of the stickiest things that have really not been wavered on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a lot of really gray stuff where it comes to the court and they have to make a pretty hard court judgment call. It's rare to have a case where it's pretty black and white. And this one, I would argue it is. But I think another important point off to the side of this is, if this were to pass muster and be like declared fine, you have to think about what the other possibilities it opens up. And they even talked about this in the court today. Like, if you had a president say like, hey, there's a climate emergency, I'm declaring it an emergency, and now there's going to be a border adjustment tax on carbon, like through this precedent, there'll be no argument against it, essentially. Yeah. And that's one example of probably a million examples that we could all just dream up of. Oh, you just raise taxes on trade in any way you kind of want to, as long as you're like, oh, emergency,
Yeah, magic emergency.
Yeah.
Interruption there. I'd take a quick break, but should be seamless for those listening. I think we've covered everything on the tariff side of it. Yeah. It'll be interesting the way that plays out. I was just reading some stuff by Basent talking about other things that they're planning in the event that gets done. So I don't think it's going to be the end of the saga by any stretch of the imagination. But
tariffs don't end. It just becomes a bit of a whack-a-mole, like stance him up, take him down, stance him up, take him down, stuff like that. But.
Yeah, one thing I will say, I just saw this tweet from this guy that was like, it showed like an old World War II tank, like going close to a cliff and then like, going off the cliff and dying, I guess. And he's like, if Trump's tariffs get repealed, this is the market. And I'm sitting there going, no, I don't know. That's not the way that works.
Yeah. And to be clear on that, like we saw it in our own portfolio. We had a few of our investments are up a lot today, and for no other reason than because if they don't have to pay tariffs anymore, it's a huge deal for them, or less tariffs, I should say.
Yeah.
That's more income for the U.S. economy, and it's a bigger deficit from the government. Both things are stimulative for the economy and for the market.
Yep. And gold and commodities and all that kind of stuff.
Right. And if you go back to the one big beautiful bill, like one of the big arguments around that was like, yeah, that blows out the deficit, but we're going to fill in a bunch of it with tariffs, which has been largely true. So if you unfill the tariff part, then that bill did blow a bigger hole in the deficits than we thought. Now, again, they will, a lot of these tariffs will come back in other forms and stuff, but it's not, I don't think you can completely refill the hole that you're going to create here. So I think it makes the deficit a bigger problem than it would have been.
Well, yeah. I mean, you'd have to go through the exact numbers, and I'm sure I'm not going to be right on the money, but if you repeal tariffs, you've got to immediately start looking at, $2.3, $2.5 trillion deficits as opposed to $2 trillion.
I mean, yeah, if it was going to create, let's say it was going to create 300 billion on the year.
Weren't that the projections like 336 billion or something
like that? Yeah. If let's say it goes down to 150, 200, I mean, that's still 100 plus billion or whatever of lost income. That not only that, but it's possible that they have to repay the money they took in as part of this, because, if what you were doing was illegal, you may have to give it back. 200
billion is a lot of money.
I don't know how that would work. That's crazy. I can't even wrap my head around it. But if you got to cut $1 billion check to GM because you took that money, like, that's a way bigger deficit. And now GM has $1 billion to throw around. Like,
200 billion is a lot of money. Flip side.
Last time I checked,
it's only about a 3.5% move on Nvidia. So,
Hey, Snapchat up 16% after hours. They have some deal with Perplexity that is saw across the tape. So,
holla.
Yeah. When two of your favorite things combine.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't really like Snapchat other than the possibility that the investment could theoretically work when no one else thinks it can.
I'll be honest with you. I think the anti-Snapchat takes sound like reaches. I look at their growth. I look at their revenue growth. Now I have heard some critiques on stock-based comp.
Yeah, totally fair.
They do a lot of that. But look at the revenue growth. You continue to grow revenue at that rate. And then you're also getting it. I think it's like 3.5 times revenue. 3.5 times sales is where we bought it at.
All I remember is less egregious than most of the space, Yeah.
Oh, like half as egregious.
And in my opinion, anyone smart enough to work at Perplexity is getting something right.
Yeah. And then the other side of it is too, you go, yeah, I've got kids. Kids use Snapchat more often than they use regular text messaging.
Yeah.
And those kids are going to get older, and they are getting older. I just at this price, I'm not advising people go out and get it.
No, that's it's a speculative play. It's not a pure value play or something.
It is, but it's a speculative play that I don't think it's speculative because, and here's why I don't think it's speculative. At the valuation we bought it at, what the company is currently doing, we just need them to keep doing what they're doing, and it'll be a phenomenal investment. Do you get what I'm saying? We're not betting the house on an unknown type thing. That's the flip side is it's not Sprouts Farmers Market.
Right. They have, when I say speculative, I mean, it has downside bigger than a lot of the things we normally play in. Maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it has revenue. The revenue is growing.
Profit.
It's not, 100 times, earnings or whatever. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I think the reason I like about it or what I like about it is the core business is a good product that people like and that is growing.
Right.
The other thing I like about it, it is uniquely tied into the fabric of the younger generations. And, those things can change, but
I thought it was going to be a fad that would go away. And and it just didn't. So
yeah,
there's information in that alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when I look at the universe, there are so many things that are unforeseen. I mean, we could sit here and list a bunch of them out, but I'm just saying there are so many ways that investment could become something different entirely, could morph into something so much bigger, deals with Perplex. You know what I mean? Like, I look at that company at these price levels and I just see a lot of potential upside.
So Perplexity will be like a default search within Snapchat starting next year. So the AI chatbot within that thing will be live.
I mean, that could be that's interesting. And this is what I'm talking about. Now, obviously there's a lot of things that go wrong, but if you're going to take Snapchat with that younger generation and they freaking love it, they love it. If you're going to turn it into like an all-encompassing ecosphere, that could become really interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting.
The other thing I think is interesting about Snapchat,
and Perplexity is paying Snap to do that, not the other way around.
Wow. And the other thing I think is really interesting about that is,
and they're getting equity in Perplexity.
How much?
I don't know. The deal apparently is a $400 million deal, but that's, I don't know what that actually means in real life.
I like it.
It's interesting. That's a real time update for you folks. We're just like reading about it on the air. So who knows?
Yeah. I'm going to want to dig into that and see how that's structured. But these are the types of things I'm saying. When I see something like Snapchat, it could get purchased by. There's. What was that look about?
It was lightning in our area. It just surprised me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Sorry, I was staring at your phone during a live podcast.
It cracks me up. I
make a lot of faces.
That must have been what my wife was talking about. My wife just sent me a text and she's like, you probably shouldn't still be at work with all this rain. That's her basically telling me she just wants me to come home.
Yeah, it's totally fine earlier. And we're going out tonight for our anniversary. So
happy anniversary. Yeah. By the way, how many years has it been?
8.
8 years. All right. You're past the 7-year itch.
The Ocho. Yeah. Didn't get itchy. That was good news.
Yeah. Well, good for you. I wouldn't have thought you'd gotten itchy.
Yeah, that's fair. Totally fair.
Her, on the other hand, woman's got the patience of Job. But you're still 2 years away from 10. See, 10, you're like officially an OG.
Well, in post-COVID years, that's like 10 minutes. So whatever.
That's true. See, me, I've got number 21 coming up this year. That just means you're old.
Well, in this case, we're about close to the same age. So
yeah. Okay. Fair enough. All right. On to different news. What other stuff do you have that you want to get to?
So we had good economic data come out today. Manufacturing continues to be in the dumps, but the services ISM came out and it was a good bit better than expected. ADP jobs were better than expected. I mentioned this, that the weekly jobs data has been picking up. It looks like the worst over. The summer was kind of ugly. The monthly one was, I think it was like 60,000 when we were expecting like 40. So we added a lot of jobs, especially given the net immigration thing. It was a very good number. And as we've learned, ADP is more trustworthy than the government data anyway. So the economy very much may be stabilizing here, other than manufacturing. But I think we all know at this point that manufacturing probably isn't a big enough part of our economy to really blow the whole thing up. So that was notable.
The further this goes on and I watch this economic data come in, I just keep going back to the stock market. I think without the context of asset prices increasing and the stock market going up, I'd be pulling my hair out trying to understand like what is keeping to propel this economy. Like, everybody goes, well, look at household net worth. Like, yeah, okay, but that net worth number isn't really real, right? Because you're not getting constant dividends off all your assets. You have constant bills on all your debts. Do you know what I'm saying? So like,
right. That wealth houses went up a ton after COVID, and so did the Qs.
Yep.
So if those things reverse, especially the Qs, obviously, like you have a problem.
I just think I think the stock market is pumping so much money into this economy, and to me, it's the only thing that explains it. Just like you'll see the economy floundering or whatever, and look like you're going the wrong way. S&P jumps 15%, and boom, everything's fine.
Yeah, I'm convinced if the market went down 30% and held there for 3 months, like all the data would start rolling over.
Oh, I want 100%.
And to go back to, like, I mentioned, like, hey, we had that jobs problem in the summer. Well, that was after we had a drawdown because of Liberation Day.
Yep,
like, that was a big part of it.
Yep, people tightened up. Right. Yeah, just wild to see. Wait, on the macro, the macro picture is really a mess, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's where you have like the Fed kind of surprised us last week, and I think it's because of that. Like, because it's a mess. Like, and we've been saying this for months now, but you can make good arguments from different angles on the broader economy. Like, you can paint a pretty decent picture, you can paint a pretty ugly picture. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's is aggregate income and spending a real problem, and is employment a real problem, right? Like, and those obviously are connected. Both have had some struggles along the way, but none of that stuff is like a problem to the point where you're like, oh, like recession pretty close here. Like, just not.
It's not. But the thing that scares you about this environment is I feel like look, everything moves faster. I was reading a story either this morning or yesterday that crowdfunding is I could be butchering the statistics, but it's something along this line. That there are as many crowdfunding campaigns now to help people cover the cost of living as there is, like, disasters. And typically people go on there, my kid got hurt or whatever. Now you're seeing just as many crowdfunding campaigns around just subsidizing cost of living.
The cost of living is a huge problem. It has not gone away. It isn't going away, and is very difficult to tackle. I mean, it's almost sad and dark that you can have a cost of living crisis while the economy's growing 3-4%. It's sort of unfortunate that because the aggregate macro economy is fine while tens of millions of people are not fine.
No, I know.
That's where we're at.
I was thinking about it the other day and felt kind of guilty about it because I was sitting there going, like, why these people are struggling with the cost of living, because our portfolios are up, 28% this year or whatever. My income's gone up a lot.
Right.
And you just see that gap between the haves and the have-nots just continue to grow. And one of the other most frustrating things I have about it, and not to get political, because I don't think talking about I don't think talking about finance in the way that I'm going to is political. I think it's factual, right? If you want to sit here and have a debate about tariffs, sit there and have a debate about abortion, things like that. Those are much more political topics, tax policy, things like that, right? And I think that there's legitimate views on both sides of a lot of those arguments. When it comes to what we're seeing here in the United States, what is it's not shocking, but mind-numbing to me, is looking at the results of inflation and cost of living, which were entirely caused by the government, right? And then turning around and thinking increased government with communist and socialist policies is the way to address it. It's like saying, hey, we just got robbed. Go find us some robbers to fix that. You know what I mean? Like it's And
I think there are some national answers that require some big stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Some of this like industrial policy stuff we're seeing, correctly done. Some of that is important. I think even some tariffs properly done, important part of it. Subsidies can be an important part of it. Even to a small, very, very strategic degree, some of this like taking a stake in a company stuff can make sense, or something close to that. But to your point, like this, I feel like the populist from both sides, left populism, right populism, impulse to go a very, and I'll use this analogy again, Peronist avenue of like let's put our thumb on all the scales to get the outcomes we think we're going to get. It just becomes. It's enticing to people in power, whether they're a left populist or a right populist. And we got here because, the tried and true establishment folks just did such a bad job of managing things for the last, generation.
I think they did a wonderful job, which is illustrated in the wealth gap. I mean, meaning they did exactly what they were trying to do.
It's hard to argue against that.
Yeah. Yeah, the other issue we've got in this country too going on, and that's adding to the political incalcitrance that's currently, at least in my opinion, defines certainly Congress, and I think the majority of our government. But one of the other issues you have is that old adage: it's much easier to deceive somebody than to convince them that they've been deceived, right? And I think that that's where you have so much of that, where despite facts and despite obvious evidence to the contrary, people are just digging in ideologically, right? And just kind of like sticking to that. And one of the first things that comes to mind is actually an example from the right, which is, this whole attitude you see so much on the right now, which is the opposite of whatever my enemy's view is going to be my view. And that is a really stupid way to go through.
Right.
We're like sit there and, pushing back against, the woke stuff and, the flagship of that movement becoming like anti-Semitism, right? It's not a good way to prove to people that there isn't a racist problem, right?
Yeah.
Flip around on the economic side. It's the exact same thing going on in New York City, where you're sitting there going, guys, you are complaining about the results. You're complaining about the outcomes that were a result of overspending and over-involved government. And you think you're going to solve that with more overspending and more over-involved government. It's just, and I was saying on an interview earlier today, why I say that's not a political view is because it's not. Free markets are more efficient. And the reason they're more efficient is sort of I was explaining this to my kids the other night, and I think it's important for people to understand this. Free markets are made up of free people. And the winner in a free market is somebody that can deliver a good to that market. The way he wins is by delivering that good or service to the market at a cheaper price. The way he usually is able to do that is he usually has proximity or access to that good or that service that allows him a competitive advantage. So what you end up with at the marketplace is all the people that have the best access, therefore the best prices for goods, are the ones showing up at the marketplace to sell their wares, right? And then the people showing up are looking for the best price, and they've got capital to buy that good because they've been good at allocating their existing capital. And it's this self-balancing thing. Is it perfect? No, but it is the most efficient way to distribute goods because inside of it kind of encapsulates the greatest good for the greatest number. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, there are winners and losers, so then you flip around.
It harnesses human selfishness and makes it productive.
100%. Okay. Now, when you have a government doing that, you have people that by definition are usually some of the furthest away from the good and the service that are allocating goods based on political desires and political, meaning it can't be as efficient. It's not even trying to be. That's not the purpose. Right. And there's things inside of it that aren't even the fault of the people that are running those institutions that disallow them to be price competitive with these things. We don't disagree, right? Like you're worried about somebody breaking into your house, and so instead of buying a dog, you bought a cat. Well, congratulations, you got a pet. It's just not going to do what you want it to do. It's not able to, and that to me is the most frustrating part, is not the political. We're always going to have political divides and political arguments and stuff like that. But when we start going back to the trash heap of history and grabbing completely disproven, and I've said this before, and I don't want to, but it'd be like bringing back letting blood and leeching. It's that stupid. We're going to lower costs by handing it over to. When has that ever worked?
And I think unfortunately it is becoming bipartisan. Like I think both sides are willing to, it's like, let's see how much we can use the state to do economically. It's just different styles of it. It's different ways of doing it. And this is one of the reasons I like to use the Peronism framing, is because one of the things you learn when you learn a lot about Argentine history and politics is like, it's, I think in America, we think, oh, Peronism, leftism. It's not, though. Like, there's a lot of like centrist views and rightist views and leftist views that all get wrapped into Peronism. It's more of like a superstructure of how to use government than it is anything else. And I feel like that's where we're kind of going back in that. It's more of like, how can we, mobilize the state to get certain economic outcomes. But they're in ways that are very distortive. It depends on which style you want to use. They distort in different ways, but they both distort.
And I was listening to Mamdani's acceptance speech, and there was a particular part of it that scared me the most. And it was the way that he cited all of the different nationality groups and listed them off separately and didn't say a single thing about Americans. Didn't say a single thing about white Americans. And the reason, forget the racism parts of it, right? E pluribus unum, out of many one, right? The only way this works is if everybody is coming from all over the world and uniting as Americans, not Nepalese, not Senegalese, not Kenyan, not Chinese. We're Americans. And when I watch this divisive politics on top of the toxicity that's in there, we got a serious problem on our hands.
Now I think we've crossed from the economic part to just pure political part.
I agree.
But I agree.
But I agree with you. But what I'm saying is to everybody, like I want that not to be a political issue. I'm looking at it and going, hey guys, if we all quit being Americans, this thing is gone.
Yeah, the no isms thing.
Yeah,
that goes back to Teddy. Maybe I can't remember who came up with that, but it just That's not to say you like people have to just completely throw in the trash their heritage or anything. It's just.
No, I mean, them carrying certain parts of that heritage over is what's created the beautiful quilt that is America.
That's why I get to have Thai food one night and Mexican food the next night. 100%. It makes me really happy.
Yeah, and I love it, right? And that's one of the unique things about America, right? But when you start separate, we're not supposed to be separated into races. And you're talking about the resegregation of society. This is not good.
Which feels like a real trend in certain places at certain times. So
it's... You know what, man? Just as a human being, it's really defeating.
I think this may be like almost like a cyclical fourth turning-ish thing where you go through cycles of people really wanting to feel like individuals and very special and unique. And then you go through periods where there's like a need for and a yearning for that cohesion again. And we are clearly not in that environment, right? We are in a, how can I feel special? How can, and not to mention like, kind of the financial nihilism stuff of like, how can I get mine and how can I feel special and unique? And like, it's not like, how can I pull my weight with you? And how can I, it's really interesting. Be together here.
It's really interesting you bring that up.
It's the rippers versus weavers thing. We just have a lot of rippers now.
Yep. And it's also interesting that is happening when it's happening. We're quickly emerging, and we could probably do the math, but within the next 5 to 7 years, the biggest voting block in the country is going to be millennial and Gen Zers. And the reason I bring that up is those dynamics politically are probably more likely to be amplified over the coming years because you have two generations that grew up in social media, meaning by definition, the social media age is just much more self-focused, right? It's much less collective. It's much more individually focused. And now, I mean, that can turn around too, right? People could start voting against that stuff because they thought it was their own self-interest too.
That's the hard thing is like every time I think I understand a generation, they kind of evolve, And they will continue to, right? Like for instance, I used to mock the old idea that millennials were a lost generation. We're going to stay in their parents' basements. I was going to be like, yeah, they're going to do that till they don't. Right. They're going to end up getting houses. And that is one of the reasons houses got really expensive is because we formed households and we bought them. Yeah. Yeah. No kidding.
The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate and actual performance may differ.
I really hope this isn't the beginning of a trend. And it isn't. I don't say that. Like, I don't say that from a political position. I say that from a human interest position, meaning, hey, I'm all about trying new ideas and doing things, but, it's not new. No, and if your policy is, hey, let's put our hand on that red hot burner to see if it's hot, like that. No, I'm good. It's right. I'm pretty sure that red color on that baby means it's probably pretty hot. And that's really what I find really concerning. Is there doesn't seem to be a third rail anymore where people on both sides agree we can't go there.
Right. Most forms of statism have failed for various reasons, for very important reasons. Like, so to go all in on any version of statism, probably going to get the same outcome. So yeah, I'd rather not reburn the hand too. But at the same time, I feel like we're still learning a lot of important lessons and starting to like have emergent things that we've never had to deal with before, because certain new technologies are just new. Like you don't get to look in the history book about how to deal with
AI.
some of the stuff. So like I don't know. It's a tough mix.
It is a very, very tough mix. Yeah. And after the other part that is a very troubling thing, you and I were talking about this, is that the rapid way in which you're watching, it's not like we're watching elections swing in 2 to 4 year periods of, oh, the Democrats won, the Republicans won. It's the extremes of those parties, right?
Yeah, both sides are pushing out to the populist edges. There's no two ways about that. I mean, I think our primary system makes that even worse, because you don't get to be in the middle and have sensible views on things and do well in a primary.
No.
That ain't gonna work.
No.
So that incentive system, but that's where I do think that you could drive a truck through the middle where a lot of Americans are with a third party. Obviously there are structural issues and headwinds to that working, but if you got the right backing and the right person carrying that flag, I think the opening for that is immense.
I agree with you in principle. The problem is I think that is the quickest way to just complete one party dominance. Meaning, I think for a variety of reasons, a third party candidate is going to be far more attractive to people that are traditionally on the right than people that are traditionally on the left.
I disagree with that, but
I mean, we've got a very good example in recent history: Ross Perot versus Gore. And
why I say
Clinton.
like the right person carrying the flag and the right structure behind it, like that. I don't think America needed Ross Perot. We didn't have insane left versus insane right.
Yeah, fair enough.
In the average election, and we didn't have like, and back then, the average politician was at least still partially a statesman that was like seemed to like understand like basics of economics and history and stuff. Like it wasn't like influencers seeing who could dunk on each other on Twitter to get votes and you know what I mean? Like
what I'm saying is that my fear is that females between the ages of 18 to 29, which were the most dominant aspect of this recent election, I do not see a statistically significant portion of that voting bloc getting attracted by a sensible third party candidate. That's like a microcosm. I'm just
very
saying.
Much so. But and every time I think I latch on to something like that, like certain voting block, they go and flip and go do the other thing in the next election or so.
Well,
so I don't know.
You make a really good point there, because it circles back to the point I first made. When you see such polar opposite candidates getting elected in the same area inside of a 2 to 4 year span,
exactly.
A
lot of the same people. There's a lot of people would have voted for Bernie or Trump happily, maybe not happily, but like they would have done that without a problem. They couldn't be more different in so many ways. But I feel like both were willing to be like, look, I have a little crazier idea on how to fix these big problems. Because I think the average person is like, we have a big problem. And then like we have this guy, wanting to change it 1%, like not going to fix it. Like, I don't know if this will work, but at least this person wants to change it 90%. Like, let me try that. I already tried your 1% solutions. They don't work. So but I think we've gone so far to the like, hey, I'll change it all, that the average person in the middle is like, hold on, wait, what? Like, I think a lot of us feel completely politically homeless if we're in the middle. And for me, like I'm in the middle. Like I'm center left on some stuff, center right on some stuff, very libertarian on some stuff. Like, so I feel completely politically homeless in any national election. I mean, here in any state election, but if you gave me a sensible person that was kind of in the middle, focused on being a weaver, not a ripper, focused on solving problems, not dunking on opponents, like I would just be all about it. Like,
yeah.
I think millions of people would. I think for most of our history, the parties came pretty close to representing the average person, and were decent at trying to solve the average person's problems. I just think we're not there anymore. And
I don't think they have. I don't think they have a. I mean, I don't think you make a really good argument that either party doesn't even have a handle on what the average person's problems are.
Oh, I think that's very clear.
Yeah. And I don't think they understand it. I don't think they can sympathize it. I think they're part of the ruling class. I think that they're going to their cocktail parties and everything's great. They're
right.
You look at the new report of insider trading came out on Congress. It's just disgusting. It's just disgusting. And
it's one thing for like a broke 20-something financial nihilist to go, bet it all on some altcoin. But it's another for like someone that's already made it to be, grifting on non-public information.
They're looting it.
To go from $100 million net worth to $120 million net worth. Like
they're looting it.
What
look, there's very little. If you look at the power class, the elite, whatever you want to call them in this country, there's not a lot of space between them and what the Senate was doing in Rome right before the fall. Yeah, just enriching themselves.
The inability of people to define enough and stop at enough, and more importantly, to turn that around and go like, all right, how can I use what I've made to like better other people's lives? Is just it's pretty intense. Like, you know me, man, I always say like the lack of the noblesse oblige, the nobility obliges is just, it's rampant and it's systemic and the average noble, if you will, is more concerned with just getting a bigger gate built around what they got.
And and here's the irony of it, of which they'll never be able to spend anyway. It doesn't even impact their quality of life.
No.
You know what an extra 50 million does?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah.
It's bragging rights with your other rich buddies.
Yeah.
Right. And then that's another part of this, right?
It turns into like power games instead of money games and stuff too. So
yeah. But you sit there and you watch these people do it. You go, when they come for you, because they will, right? Eventually pitchfork, when they come, you got yourself to blame.
Right. It's like it is a weird loop back into like medieval times where, the king and his court, if they get overthrown, like all those people are in big trouble, right? And it feels like that way now, like more and more, like whoever is on the downslope, just like in really bad emerging economies and stuff, like, oh, you're in the outgoing regime, like you're all going to jail.
Yeah.
Taking all your stuff.
And that's why I've long thought that, one of my hopes in this whole thing is that people on both sides start realizing, hey, if you want to find the real fraudster, if you want to find the real criminal in any system, look for the people or the group of people that always win no matter what. You know what I mean? Like there's the giveaway. And you look at both sides and go, hey guys, what? You're so busy aiming at each other. Take a step back and look at who wins no matter what happens. It's not you.
Yeah.
You keep getting screwed. But there is a class of people that keep winning.
Right.
Why don't you get mad at them? And that's what I fear.
But if we're all yelling at each other on social media, then no one's yelling at them.
Well, no, and that's the problem with what's going on in New York is those people are looking at you and going, we did get mad at him. That's why we voted in Mondami, right? And you're like, yeah, it's so, yep, no, that's not going to cut it. I mean, when, the other thing you can sit there and say, one of the greatest things that might have happened to Mondami, and this is the problem about being in the place that we're at politically and culturally here. One of the biggest things that might have gotten Mondami elected was the fact that Trump and Bill Clinton said, don't vote for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it reminds me of the shoe being on their foot. Like, the one thing the Democrats never, ever like got straight was like, all that stuff is fuel for Donald Trump and for the media. Like, and it just keeps him out there. It keeps him energized. Like, the one thing they all along should have done was just kind of ignore. But instead, it was always like hardcore pushback, and like everything has to be like against him. Not forget like what are we going to do to help people? It's like, no, what's against him, and that just fuels him and his people. I think the same thing. Like, yeah, if you're just out there telling people how bad and dangerous he is, like a lot of his people are gonna be like, no, it sounds like you're scared of him. I'll vote for him. The
other thing too is that you're watching inflation is becoming the defining characteristic of every single election. And it's really funny because, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons they just keep switching spots over and over. Neither of them are taking care of it. Neither of them fixed it.
Exactly. And I think that is the most important political issue today I think the Biden administration and the party completely missed how important that would be electorally. And to me, it's clear personally. I know people disagree, but personally, I think it's the biggest reason Trump did so well was just the pure, cost of living stuff. Like, oh yeah, what was it? I mean, the exit polls show it and stuff, but so to sort of leave it largely unaddressed is just wild to me to watch. Like you win because of reason X, because people think you're going to fix it, and you're like, nah. Let's not only let's not fix it. Let's gaslight people and tell them there is no inflation while there is. Like, man. Not politically good idea. Like, People have bank accounts. They know what stuff costs.
Well, I just don't think it was good messaging, right? Which means you had virtually nothing to do with the inflation. It certainly on a political level, you had nothing to do with it, right? I mean, did you? Of course.
If you go all the way back to 2018 or whatever, like 19, technically, but like I'm okay with the statute of limitations ending after 4 years, though.
I'm
fine with pinning all that on Biden.
Yeah, I know. It just feels disingenuous because you're like, to sit there and go, for instance, 130% debt GDP. You want to hang all that on Biden? Well, we wouldn't have gotten there unless we had 100% first, and we didn't do that under him.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so just
literally every president's fault since forever again.
Yeah. But yeah, just the messaging was odd. And I didn't understand that from the very beginning. I would have, if I was Trump, I'd still be campaigning against inflation. And that probably would have delayed my institution of the tariffs, because my first thought would be, hey, get this inflation down because it's such an important thing. And then in midterms, like my thinking would have been going in, whether it would have been Biden or Trump that would have won, I'd have been like, you need to operate through the first 2 years with an eye on the last two, right? Meaning if you don't hold the wins in the midterms, it doesn't matter. You're not going to get anything done, and you're going to be a lame duck president like you were the last 2 years, the last time it went down. So if you want to address tariffs, do it in the second 2 years, right? And I'm not even saying it like, I'm not even saying don't use tariffs. I'm just saying if what you're fighting is inflation, and if that's the number one thing that got you in, that's probably not the best place to start.
No, and especially like, it's one thing to tariff, certain things that are really important or whatever. But when it's like food, man, can we do a carve out for food? Like, you know what I mean? Like that hits regular everyday people right in the pocketbook. And if people on the lower, income spectrum, they're going to feel that in a real way. Like, you go buy a bag of coffee and you're like, what?
Well, and there's another point too, with where our culture and our society is. If we really want to get back to our knitting, if we really want to maintain, free markets and all the things that make America great, you're going to have to institute those things slowly, because you've got a populace now that doesn't want to put up with even 6 months of pain for anything. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I think that needs to guide policy. Like, you got to attack these things, but you've got to do it inside of a framework that accounts for that.
I think the biggest problem with all this, and this is very, very bipartisan, this is just an American problem, I think. And that is, I think we're just looking for the easy button on everything. And like, it's like the rare earth thing. Now, I know they have to sell this publicly. It's just it's part of the job, right? But a lot of the messaging around it is like, hey, we're going to have this thing. This whole thing is going to be solved in 2 years. And like, no, that's not how this works. Like,
it's not possible.
To me, it's like, why can't we own the fact that some of this stuff's gonna take a while, and like, it's gonna require some sacrifice, and like, some of the problems we have, they're a 20-year problem. But like, if you don't start working on it now, then you never solve it, and then you're 20 years later, you want your kids to have it better.
How long did it take us to outsource our entire manufacturing base?
Yeah, how long?
It took about 20 years.
Like, China was a 30-year overnight success, but we're gonna just 2-year the same thing they did in 30 is kind of the like vibe I get. And again, totally bipartisan. I don't think anyone's willing to tell you how long it takes to catch up on certain things. And you know what I mean? And that, I find that incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
Because no one's going to sacrifice for it. If you keep telling them like, don't worry, we're just going to hit that easy button over there, then, no one's gonna be like, oh, well, I guess I better get ready for working really hard for a few years to catch up. And like, no.
Well, it goes right along. I think it's a perfect bedfellow of the stat that you like to cite, which is we're 31st in the world in academic performance, but number one in terms of how confident we are about our ability. You know what I mean? It's the easy button. Like you said, that's just, and you're looking at a lot of the problems and you go, hey guys, the biggest issue we have here is the people telling you there's an easy button. There isn't one.
It reminds, I'll leave us with a football analogy. And I bet you've seen this. It is, you go through maybe junior high, early into high school with a kid that is clearly the most talented kid. Mm-hmm. Just the God-given ability is just off the charts. So maybe this kid doesn't have to work hard because they're just better than you.
Yep.
But then there's like that small kid over in the corner just working. And then next thing you know, it's junior, senior year, and all of a sudden the kid with all of the natural blessings is getting passed up by the kid that was working the whole time.
Because he had his growth spurt.
Yeah. So like it feels like that sometimes to me and
it's always that way.
Yeah.
It's always that way. And that's why Americans dominated for so long, is that was an ethos that was at the center of our culture, right? Get up earlier, work harder, work longer. And if you look at us today, like, are there still parts of us that are like that? Yeah, you and I are like that. And there's a lot of hardworking Americans are out there like that. But you look at the younger generation, not that they can't be. I think they can learn that and they can read.
Yeah, and if it's a need, people
they will figure it out.
Right.
But that ethos is not alive and well in America anymore. Yeah,
and we used to find a way to stay hungry, even if we were on top or near the top. And I think about 1990, something happened. We lost that ability to stay hungry. And I think to this point, China's doing a good job of like, hey, they're starting to do really well and stuff. And they find ways to very maybe unfortunate and bad ways, if being honest, but like to keep people hungry. Like this whole like I ain't gonna let you get super rich thing. That sounds messed up to an American. You know what I mean? Like Jack Ma starts getting cool, and it's like, yeah, sit down, Jack. Right? Yeah. To us, it's like, whoa, like that guy. Why would you do that? Big picture though, like I don't know, like everyone's staying hungry. Like it might kind of work. I'm not saying we should sideline, tell, our best and brightest to sit down after they make it. But like, point being, they have effectively stayed hungry. They don't let people get wildly rich on well, they did, but not the same way. You don't just get to buy stocks and get really rich, in China. Like you got to go work for it.
Yeah.
And if you're an AI researcher, you're not getting $1 billion contract or $100 million contract. Like, nope, sorry. You just got to work for a pretty normal, number there.
Yeah. And that really concerns me because that part, like I said, of the American exceptionalism, American culture, that was, you go listen to songs like Elton John that he put out like 70s and 80s talking about American muscle and, just that bravado that we're going to outwork you. We're going to be up longer and we're going to get up earlier and all that kind of stuff.
Hard stuff didn't bother people.
No, we were the country in the world that tackled those things, and
like getting engineering degree is really hard. Like those cats are on campus longer than you if you're getting a softer degree, let's say, but in the end, it really pays. And it's really important for the country to have that kind of workforce. And that this is a microcosm of, the average person is like not really interested in getting that degree.
And also really helps to have a bunch of people that understand complex systems too. And, everywhere I look, I just see a breakdown of the educational system on so many different levels.
I mean, it's where it all starts, but
I agree with you. I think it's impossible. Like if people were educated correctly, and not just when I mean that, I don't mean just that they agree with me, but in terms of classical thinking, classical education, Socratic methods, scientific, right? Things that we know are good, that work, all that kind of stuff. I think so many of these issues wouldn't exist.
Yeah. And high standards that don't come down to you, you come up to them.
Yep. And I think so many of these issues wouldn't exist. And you've had academia telling kids that they can have their cake and eat it too. And that it's all about oppression and all this nonsense. And you've got generations of people now that think the way to fix everything is to take from that person and give to themselves. And you're like, yeah, that's because that's worked so well.
It doesn't grow the pie.
No. Got anything else, my man?
Nope. That's it.
It does it for us today. All right, you guys, you know the drill. Catch us on social media. Why is our camera not flipped back and forth anywhere?
I don't know.
We got to get a new.
I saw myself there for a second. Oh, there we are. No,
we got to get a new board operator. See, that's what you say in the radio game, right? Anyway, follow us on social media at Twitter or on Twitter at KYR Radio at X. Actually, I still can't.
Whatever. I call it Twitter until I die.
Yeah. At Pinecone Mackerel for Chase. And then as always, for the video content, go to YouTube. Just search Know Your Risk Podcast. Go to knowyourriskpodcast.com. Download and subscribe. You guys know the deal. Have a wonderful evening. We'll see you tomorrow. You're listening to Know Your Risk Podcast. Download and subscribe at knowyourriskpodcast.com.
Investment advice cannot be given without a client service agreement. Zach Abraham is an investment advisor representative of Trek Financial, an SEC registered investment advisor. Bulwark Capital Management is a marketing name only and does not carry a separate registration.